You pulled up the calculator on your phone and ran the numbers. And the number that came back didn't just disappoint you, it scared you. The kind of scared that stays with you at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and you're lying there doing the math again in your head, wondering how it got this far. Maybe you're 44. Maybe you just crossed 50. Maybe the retirement account that was supposed to be your future has been sitting at a number you're too embarrassed to say out loud, untouched, barely growing, a quiet reminder every time you log in that somewhere along the way you fell behind. And here's the thought that's hardest to shake. Not that you started late. You know that. It's the creeping suspicion that you might have started too late. That the people who retire with real money started early, stayed disciplined for decades, and the window for you specifically already closed while you were busy surviving. That thought is the most expensive lie in personal finance, because the path from where you are right now, behind, scared, and certain the math no longer works in your favor, to a quiet 7-figure retirement is not closed. It is not theoretical. It has been walked before by real people with less money than you have right now and less time than you think you have. Today, you walk it with me. 9 moves. The exact right order. No step skipped. 2 years ago, a woman I'll call Esther sat at her kitchen table in a small house in Ohio with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee that had gone completely cold. She was 45 years old. Her retirement account held $18,700, most of it left over from a 401k she'd stopped contributing to when she changed jobs a decade earlier and never rolled forward. Her 2 kids were nearly grown. For the first time in years, there was the smallest sliver of margin in her monthly budget, and alongside that margin, a frightening amount of ground to make up. Esther sat at that table completely convinced she had missed her window, that people who retire comfortably started in their 20s, and she had simply run out of road. She was wrong, completely and provably wrong. By the time we reach the last move in this video, you'll understand exactly why. And you'll be holding the same map she used to climb from $18,700 to a trajectory that will carry her comfortably past retirement. My name is Alicia. I've spent years studying how ordinary people on ordinary incomes build real wealth, and how the ones who start late often make mistakes that cost them the few years they have left. Subscribe now if you want more of this. Let's walk the path. Let me start with the part nobody says to you gently, because you deserve the honest version and not a version designed to make you feel better before you've done anything yet. It is later than you think, and it is nowhere near as late as you fear. Run the actual numbers and the fear loses most of its teeth. Take someone starting at 45 with nearly nothing. They commit $2,000 a month into a broad market index fund. They use a long-run return of 7%, deliberately conservative, well below what the American market has historically delivered over the last century. 20 years later, at 65, that account clears $1,040,000. Start 5 years earlier at 40 with just $1,500 a month. That same 7% across 25 years that builds to roughly $1,216,000. Neither of those people earned a dramatic income. Neither timed the market or picked a brilliant stock. They started where they stood and did not stop. The math did everything else. Now, I'm not going to protect you from the cost of waiting because that would insult you. $1,000 a month started at 30 grows to approximately $1,820,000. That same $1,000 started at 40 lands, closer to $813,000. The decade you didn't move cost you something close to $1 million. That is real. You are allowed to feel the weight of it for exactly one breath. Then you have to set it down. The lost decade is gone. No amount of grief buys a single year of it back. No amount of regret adds $1 to the account you didn't open. The only years that will ever build your number are the ones standing in front of you right now. And here is what the fear never tells you: you have more of them left than it is claiming. There is something critical almost nobody explains about that gap between starting at 30 and starting at 40. The size of it is not a reason to quit. It is proof of how much force the remaining years still carry. Because the exact same compounding that made those early decades so valuable is the engine you are about to switch on for yourself. And the target itself is smaller than the frightening number your brain invented. You're not building from zero to some abstract round million because it sounds impressive. You are building the gap between your spending and the income you'll have in retirement. Your house, if you own one, is likely closer to paid off by the time you stop working, which drops your monthly costs at exactly the right moment. Social Security, though it should never be your whole plan, covers a meaningful slice of basic living for most Americans. The mountain you are staring at is partly an optical illusion. What you are actually building is far more reachable in 20 years than the panic in your chest is claiming. That is the only reason this video exists. Not to sell you a feeling, but to hand you a sequence. 9 moves in the exact order that turns a late start into a quiet fortune. Sequence matters more than speed. Here. That is the single most important sentence in this entire video. Doing the right things in the wrong order is exactly how late starters burn the few years they have left. They invest aggressively while carrying 21% credit card debt on the other side of the ledger. They pile up a year of cash in a savings account before capturing a single dollar of free employer money. They freeze on account type decisions while contributions windows close empty month after month. The 9 moves that follow are in the exact right sequence. Each one makes the next one more powerful. Skip one or rearrange them, and the math suffers disproportionately. Walk them in order, and the math stops being a source of dread and becomes a quiet, compounding certainty instead. Wealth is not built by what you earn. It is built by the distance between what comes in and what goes out. That distance, the gap, is the only engine that ever built a retirement account on an ordinary income. A woman I'll call Marisol earns $70,000 a year. An ordinary American salary. Nothing dramatic. When she saved 5% of it, the math produced the kind of number that never becomes anything. Quiet, barely moving, invisible against the cost of actually living. Lift that to 20%, about $14,000 a year, and 25 years of compounding at 7% turns it into just under $900,000. Push the gap to 30%, and that same $70,000 salary builds $1,300,000 across the same 25 years. Her income never moved a dollar. Her gap did. That is the entire secret hiding in plain sight behind every person who quietly got rich on a paycheck that never looked impressive from the outside. And to prove that income alone is a liar, meet a man I'll call Bryce. Bryce earns $180,000 a year, nearly 3 times what Marisol makes, and he is broke. Not poor, broke. Every raise he received was met by a bigger house, a newer truck, a subscription list, and a set of obligations that quietly swallowed every new dollar before it had a chance to cool. His gap is almost zero because his spending has learned to sprint to the edge of his income every single time more arrives. While Marisol quietly compounds toward $1 million on $70,000 a year, Bryce is one missed paycheck from a crisis on a salary that looks like success from the outside. His friends assume he's doing extraordinarily well. He's not. Income is what the world sees. The gap is what actually builds wealth. And those two things have far less to do with each other than anyone ever tells you. So before you invest a single dollar, you measure your gap honestly. Not what you think you spend, What you actually spent? Write down what arrives in your account each month. Write down what leaves. The number between them is your shovel. The size of that shovel is the only number that decides almost everything that follows. Track it for 60 days because memory lies and bank statements do not. The small leaks you will find in that 60 days, the forgotten subscription nobody canceled, the convenience habit that quietly costs $200 a month, the streaming service that has been running unwatched since 2022, are the easiest dollars you will ever redirect toward your future. You don't need to earn more money to start building wealth. You need to stop losing money you already have. Widen the gap however you can. Every move that follows is simply a smart use of the room you create here. Before you invest a single aggressive dollar, you kill your high-interest debt. All of it, and the order matters more than most people realize. The average credit card in the United States carried an interest rate of 21% APR in Q1 2026 per Federal Reserve data, near historic highs. Americans are collectively carrying $1.252 trillion in card balances at that rate. And credit card delinquencies hit 13.12% in Q1 2026, the highest level in 15 years, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. These are not abstract statistics. They are the financial reality of what happens when the wrong debt follows the wrong order. A man I'll call Cordell came to this path carrying $5,000 on a card at 21% and making the minimum payment every month, feeling responsible for doing exactly that. At that pace, that single balance would have followed him for years and cost him thousands in pure interest. Money that bought him nothing, not an asset, not a memory, nothing. Now hold 21% next to the 7% return we use for the market. When you pay off a card charging 21%, you are not merely eliminating a bill. You are locking in a guaranteed tax-free 21% return on every dollar you direct at it. There's no investment on earth, no index fund, no stock, no strategy anyone has ever whispered in a comment section that reliably delivers that. Guaranteed, tax-free today. Cordell stopped the modest investing he had been doing. He aimed every spare dollar at the card with everything he had and erased it in a handful of months. Then, and only then, did he point that same monthly sum at his future where it could finally grow instead of bleed. You cannot out-invest a 21% leak. You seal it first, then you build. If you're carrying more than one balance, two honest strategies both work. Hit the highest interest balance first, the avalanche method. This saves the most money mathematically. Or knock out the smallest balance first for the momentum of an early concrete victory, then roll the freed payment onto the next one. The snowball method. The math favors the avalanche. The psychology often favors the snowball. Choose the one you will actually finish, because a plan completed at a slightly worse mathematical rate beats a perfect plan you quit at month 3. The only strategy that fails is the one you abandon. The third move is what keeps moves 1 and 2 from collapsing the moment life does what life always does. Arrives with something you didn't budget for. You build a small cash floor. Not the giant emergency fund you've read about in every personal finance book since 2005. Not yet. A modest, specific cushion. Enough to absorb a blown tire, an urgent dental bill, an appliance that quits on a Tuesday without sending you back to the very card you just paid off. And you park it somewhere it actually earns while it waits. In 2026, competitive high-yield savings accounts, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, Ally Bank, SoFi, are paying around 4.0% to 4.5% APY. The national average savings account, according to current FDIC data, sits near 0.38%. Many of the largest traditional banks in the country pay 0.01%, effectively zero. Read those three numbers again. The difference between them is not a small optimization. It is free money, available to anyone willing to spend 20 minutes moving their cash to the right kind of account. And a staggering number of people leave thousands of dollars sitting at giant banks earning essentially nothing year after year. Start with 1 month of expenses, build toward 3. Resist the urge to pile up a full year of cash before investing, because money sitting in a savings account earning 4% is money not yet compounding at 7%. The late starter cannot afford to park more than necessary in safety when it could be building. The floor comes before the fortress, because the floor is what stops you from falling all the way through when the unexpected arrives. And the unexpected always arrives. The fourth move is the closest thing to free money you will ever be handed in your working life. And the data consistently shows that a startling number of people leave it sitting on the table uncollected every single year. If your employer offers to match your retirement contributions, that is not a benefit you are grateful for. That is a part of your compensation that only reaches your pocket if you deliberately reach out and claim it. A common arrangement gives you 50 cents for every dollar you put in, up to 6% of your salary. On a $60,000 income, that employer match is roughly $1,800 a year handed to you simply for contributing enough to qualify. That is an instant 50% return before the market lifts a single finger. $1,800 a year invested across 25 years at 7% becomes more than $107,000, entirely from the free portion, before you count a cent of your own contributions stacked on top. Here is the brutal way to say it. Walking past the employer match is the one place on this entire path where you turn down a guaranteed return for no reason whatsoever. No risk, no timing, no analysis required. You contribute enough to get all of it, or you leave part of your salary on the table every 2 weeks. Contribute at least enough to capture every cent of the match before you do anything else on this list. Because nothing, no fund, no strategy, no clever move pays you 50% on day one. On day. Now we arrive at the move built specifically for you. The one that makes starting late stop being a source of shame and start being, and I mean this precisely, a legal financial advantage. The American tax code does something quietly generous for people who got a late start. It gives you a bigger shovel on purpose. In 2026, a worker under 50 can contribute $24,500 to a workplace retirement plan. The moment you turn 50, the IRS adds a catch-up contribution of $8,000 on top, lifting your total annual limit to $32,500. And for the narrow window between ages 60 and 63, a super catch-up contribution raises that extra room to $11,250, pushing the annual total to $35,750 in a single year. Your Roth IRA or traditional IRA stacks on top of all of that. In 2026, the base contribution limit is $7,500. Once you cross 50, an additional $1,100 catch-up brings that to $8,600 per year per account. Think about what this actually means in practice for someone who feels behind. A woman I'll call Aisha started at 50 with close to nothing saved. She pressed hard into that expanded catch-up room year after year, filling her workplace plan at the higher 50-plus level consistently for 15 years. At our deliberately cautious 7%, that one account alone grows to more than $820,000. Layer her FA IRA contributions on top. Keep going through her early 60s when the super catch-up between 60 and 63 widens the opening even further. She crosses the $1 million line before age 65, having started at 50 with empty hands. The very lateness she had been ashamed of is the precise reason the tax code lets her move faster than a younger saver is legally allowed to. That is not a metaphor. That is the actual rule written into the IRS code, specifically because someone understood that late starters need a bigger window. Now, a quick but important note on Roth versus traditional, because late starters freeze on this question constantly and let contribution windows close empty while they decide. A traditional account gives you the tax break today and taxes the money when you withdraw it in retirement. A Roth takes the tax today and lets every dollar grow and come out completely tax-free later. The honest answer for most people is that having some of each is quietly better than going all in on one. It gives you control over your tax bill in retirement that the all or nothing crowd will never have. If you expect to be in a lower tax bracket when you stop working, traditional leans your direction. If you'd rather lock in today's rate and never owe another cent on that money, the Roth is your friend. But here's what matters far more than picking perfectly. The worst possible move is stalling on the decision while another contribution month closes empty. Pick one today. Start the deposit this week. Refine it next year when you have more information. One additional note for 2026. If you earn more than $150,000 and are making catch-up contributions, current IRS rules require those catch-up dollars to go into the Roth version of the account. This changes the tax timing but takes nothing away from the size of the opportunity. The catch-up room is generous. It does not roll over. Every year you do not fill, it is a year of oversized shovel left rusting in the garage while your retirement clock keeps running. The sixth move is the quiet one that does most of the heavy lifting while you are asleep, on vacation, distracted, tired, or simply not thinking about money at all. You automate everything. This is the single habit that separates the people who actually reach seven figures from the people who intended to. Here is the data point worth sitting with. Across Fidelity, the largest retirement plan provider in the United States, the number of ordinary account holders sitting on $1 million or more reached approximately 645,000 in early 2026. The typical one was around 59 years old. They had been contributing to the same account for roughly 25 years, through every market crash, every terrifying headline, every season of life that gave them a reason to stop. Their personal savings rate sat near 17.6%. With the employer match included, it climbed past 25% of total compensation. They were not stock pickers. They were not financial geniuses who timed anything correctly. They did one ordinary thing with extraordinary consistency, and they let time and compounding carry the weight they didn't have to carry themselves. The way you replicate that without depending on willpower you might not have on a difficult month is to remove the decision entirely. Set your contribution to pull automatically on payday before the money ever lands in your checking account and starts feeling like money you could spend. You never see it. You never miss it. You never have to summon fresh discipline to invest because the only discipline required was the single day you set it up. If your plan offers automatic escalation, where your contribution rate nudges upward by 1% each year, switch it on right now. Let your future self quietly outgrow your present self without a single argument or a single difficult month of willpower. The gap you found in move one only becomes wealth if it leaves your hands before your hands spend it. The seventh move is what you actually do with all the money the automation is accumulating. And the answer is so boring, it is almost offensive given how much is riding on it. You buy the index engine, then you leave it alone. You do not need to beat the market. The goal is simply to own it. A low-cost fund tracking the S&P 500 or the total US stock market gives you a slice of hundreds of the country's largest companies in a single purchase for fees so small they are difficult to feel. Fidelity's data puts the 30-year average annual return of the S&P 500 from January 1996 through December 2025 at 10.4%. The historical 100-year average sits around 10.59% with dividends reinvested. That is exactly why our deliberately cautious 7% assumption has still carried every single person in this video across the $1 million line. There is no need to chase the stock your coworker swears by. No need to guess which sector wins next decade. Owning the entire market means you are guaranteed to hold the winners because they are inside the fund and you never had to predict which companies they'd be. Guard that engine from the one cost almost nobody notices until it's too late. Fees. A fund charging 1 extra% per year compared to a low-cost alternative sounds like almost nothing. Across 25 years on a growing balance, that single percentage point can quietly remove a six-figure sum from your final number, money that evaporates into someone else's revenue for zero additional benefit to you. Choose the low-cost option. Keep your hands off the dial. Let compounding do the slow, patient, nearly invisible work that looks like nothing for years, and then suddenly looks like everything. A complete portfolio for a late starter can be as simple as one fund holding the entire U.S. market or a small combination of U.S. stocks, international stocks, and a growing bond allocation that stabilizes as you approach retirement. That is the entire recipe. No complexity required. The people who wait for the perfect entry point almost always lose to the people who simply buy on a consistent schedule and never stop. The timing is the buying. The buying is the timing. The eighth move quietly decides whether you keep everything the first seven built. You protect the portfolio from the only person who can truly destroy it, which is you at your most frightened. In the spring of 2026, the market dropped sharply and quickly. The headlines turned genuinely ugly. Account balances shrank in weeks, and millions of investors felt the primal, overpowering urge to pull everything out and move it somewhere safe. The savers who quietly became millionaires did the opposite. They opened their apps, looked at the balance, closed the app, and did nothing. The data from that period is clear. Investors who stayed fully invested caught the recovery that followed close behind the drop. Investors who fled at the bottom locked in real permanent losses and missed the rebound that would have restored most of what the crash took. The biggest threat to your late start retirement was never a market crash by itself. It was the very human decision to sell at the exact moment doing nothing was the most profitable move available. A second and quieter version of this same mistake is even more common. When people change jobs, a significant percentage simply cash out the retirement account instead of rolling it forward, paying the penalty, paying the tax, and torching years of compounding for a check that disappears within months. Do not be one of them, ever. When you leave a job, you roll the account forward. You keep the compounding alive and unbroken. The market will test your nerve repeatedly. Your own impatience will test it harder. Doing nothing through the storms is the single most profitable action available to a long-term investor, and it costs nothing. The ninth move is the accelerant, the one that compresses the timeline when the clock in your head is running loudest. You find extra income and funnel every dollar of it directly into the engine you've already built, not into a better life, not into a version of your current life that costs more. Every dollar of extra income, a freelance project, a skill you can monetize on weekends, a small thing you build on the side, drops straight into the automated system and compounds alongside everything else. A late starter who adds even a modest extra stream and feeds all of it to the future without letting the lifestyle rise to meet it can buy back a meaningful slice of that lost decade through velocity alone. No luck required, no breakthrough required, just extra fuel into an engine already running. Walk those 9 moves in that order, and the math stops being a source of dread. It becomes a quiet certainty instead. A man I will call Nathaniel walked this exact path beginning in his late 40s. Today, his accounts clear $1 million. His house is nearly paid off. He drives a sensible car with a great many miles on it. If you sat next to him at a cookout, you would never guess. He does not wear his money, because the wearing of money is the precise habit that kept most of his flashier neighbors broke for their entire lives. The luxury he bought was never a car or a watch or a renovation nobody needed. It was the deep, permanent calm of knowing he could walk away from any job, absorb any surprise, and sleep through any frightening headline. The quiet is not a side effect of his wealth. The quiet is the wealth. Esther is still at her kitchen table in Ohio, but the legal pad has different numbers on it now. She is not calculating how far behind she is. She is watching a gap she built deliberately, compounding quietly, month after month without drama. She thought she was hopelessly too late. She was wrong. And now she knows it. The only difference between the version of her that gave up and the version that didn't was a map, walked in the right order. On a foundation she finally took the time to understand. You are holding that same map right now. The years ahead are still entirely yours. Subscribe if you want the next breakdown. And go walk it.